So I want you to think about the last time you lost it. You got angry, you were frustrated, you maybe said something that looking back, you wish you hadn't. So one of the things that I've been talking about for years and years and years in my programs, and particularly in dealing with conflict, is the concept of amygdala or amygdala hijack. So what is that? So amygdala or amygdala hijack is when your sane, rational brain is literally hijacked by the primitive part of your brain. And we call this in a state of fight, flight, or freeze. So think about where you're at right now in this moment, listening to me. Feeling very relaxed, watching, listening, you're sane. If you were going to respond, you do it very consciously and deliberately. When something terrifying happens or something evokes enormous anger, if we don't pause and take a breath, what happens then is we literally go into a primitive state. Now, there are times where this primitive state is very helpful. So I am in my friend Nico Stein's studio in Johannesburg, South Africa, and I have his wonderful, wonderful assistant, Merritt Tyson, and we've worked together all morning, getting on really well. And there's been this sense of ease and comfort. But if, for example, in the studio today, there was a sudden explosion or a fire, what would happen is our primitive brain would take over and we'd run very fast. How often have you heard about people who lift enormous amounts of weight to free somebody because they're in a moment of complete reaction and where they are in a primitive state of, in that case, it's fight. So there are times when engaging that brain really helps us because as human beings, we are geared and we are designed to prevent danger. But what happened with Will Smith? So whether you watched the episode live or you watched the recording or heard about it, and whatever your thoughts are about Will Smith or Chris Rock or Jada Pinkett Smith, the fact is that in that moment, Will Smith's sane, rational, fully engaged brain was hijacked and he went into the primitive, I'm going to punch your lights out brain. And the fallout has been enormous. No good came from it. So it's just that reminder to all of us, the concept of pressing pause and observing yourself is so critical. And while we may not do something as dramatic as what Will Smith did, and again, whatever your thoughts on what Chris Rock said or Will Smith said, none of this really matters. What matters is you saw a brilliantly talented Will Smith. I grew up with Will Smith, watching Will Smith. His story is remarkable. His acting is spectacular. He's got a beautiful family. And suddenly in one moment, the famous saying, it takes a lifetime to build a reputation and a moment to destroy it, you're seeing in action. So all I say as a professional speaker and a coach is what we learn from this is that damage can happen when we are not engaging what we call in communication our third eye. And our third eye is that ability to observe ourselves, because that primitive reaction can never serve us well. So if anything, we've watched it in real life. It is a moment of learning. I know I've read numerous blogs and watched people speak, and I'm going to read you the official definition of amygdala or amygdala hijack. The amygdala can activate a person's fight or flight response as a reaction to a real or perceived threat of danger. Amygdala hijack describes this perhaps unnecessary triggering of this response and the actions that follow. What the amygdala is an almond-shaped structure in the brain, and it is involved in processing emotions. So we don't want to be that individual who gets hijacked, literally and figuratively hijacked, and we behave in a way that is counterproductive. So I really wanted to share that moment. I felt there's so many programs that I do around presentation skills. You can be very, very nervous, and there's amygdala hijack where you're so nervous that your brain is literally hijacked and you go into fight, flight, or freeze. So there are just so many ways that we can prevent that happening to us. And when you look at road rage or people who do things in a moment of blind anger and the damage that happens as a result, and all of us, and I know, as I say, everybody's speaking about this and everybody's weighing in, and there's lots of different opinions on who's right and who's wrong, and it doesn't matter. What matters is we all witnessed something that was uncomfortable, it was ugly, it was unnecessary, and most importantly, it's destructive, because we do better when we engage our calm, sane, rational brain, and our brain is not hijacked. So, wanted to weigh in on that. I also wanted to take this opportunity to thank Nico Steyn and Merritt Tyson, my friends in Johannesburg, who've been wonderful. We've done several live presentations from the studio in Johannesburg. It's nico@tycoontribe.com, and just enjoyed the camaraderie. And just another reminder of all of this is how I got together with Nico again, was that we had worked together at Mnet Television in South Africa, where I was an anchor and he was a producer at the time. And we stayed in touch over the 25, 30 years. And then during COVID, he saw me and we reconnected virtually, and we've now been working together. I've always said networking is going from a connection to a conversation to a collaboration. It doesn't just happen. It's not a spontaneous thing. You have to be deliberate and you have to work on it. And I'm not saying it has to be unauthentic and it has to be forced. It's got to be natural, but it does take effort. So wherever you're at in your life, my two things I wanted to share today was, one, don't ever let your brain be hijacked. Be conscious, be deliberate, be thoughtful. Press pause. Whether you're reacting to an email that frustrates you, whether you are responding to a significant other or a child, just be deliberate and say, is the way I am about to respond congruent with, in harmony with the overall way I want to be perceived as an individual? And what is the damage if I don't? I also wanted to share that I had a beautiful experience earlier in the week, in that I went to Robben Island. Robben Island, famously, Mandela and many other political activists, Robert Sobukwe, Walter Sisulu, Ahmed Kathrada, were imprisoned. Mandela was imprisoned there for 18 of his 27 years that he was incarcerated. He was there for 18 years. And he was actually released from Robben Island in 1982 and taken to Pollsmoor Prison. 1982 is the year I went to the University of Cape Town and looked out on Robben Island not far away. So I wanted to share a little of my trip to Robben Island with you, and just a reminder of a leader who was so thoughtful and so deliberate in everything he did. And because he was so conscious and so deliberate, he really managed to unite a country that could have been very divided. And yes, South Africa is not perfect, but it is remarkable. And here is my tribute to Robben Island and Nelson Mandela. Here it is.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Visiting Robben Island in Cape Town, South Africa was extraordinary. Robben Island is the place that Nelson Mandela was incarcerated for 18 years. He was incarcerated for 27 years in total, and 18 of those years was on Robben Island. And our tour guide is remarkable. Why do you think everybody who visits South Africa should visit Robben Island?
I would say that why people, I would say they must visit Robben Island is because Robben Island tells a lot of story about the history.
Seeing this island where you can see Cape Town, and seeing the quarry where Mandela and other political prisoners were forced to do manual labor. And I met Mandela several times and got to interview him, and his eyes often watered. And he spoke about how the manual labor in the very bright limestone quarry and having to chip away at the blocks had caused major eye issues in his life. And then seeing the courtyard where prisoners were forced to sit and take a pile of larger stones and just make them into smaller stones was another moment. But being there just reinforced the miracle that is South Africa and the exceptional leader that Nelson Mandela was. The tour of Robben Island is very well put together, wonderful tour guides, very informative, and yes, it has become a commercial venture, but certainly worthwhile. So I really had a remarkable day at Robben Island. If you do visit Johannesburg, South Africa, I hope you get to see Nico. If you go to Cape Town, there are so many beautiful places, but visiting Robben Island was definitely an important part of the journey, just to remind ourselves about people who have ideals and people who are prepared to sacrifice, and just what a remarkable human being and leader Nelson Mandela was. And I'll just share one of my favorite Mandela quotes with you. He says, you know, I never lose. I either win or I learn. So on that note, wishing you a wonderful weekend. And as we say in South Africa, hamba kahle.